Hello and welcome back to Disney Journey. I'm retired Imagineer Jim Shull, and I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like the news drought is over about Disney parks and Universal parks and theme parks in general. But I got to spend a moment talking about the elephant in the room, which is Disney Studios Paris and its transformation into Disney Adventure World. Now that, well, the carefully laid plans have hit a bump in the road. Let's talk about it. During a recent event, Disneyland Paris shared with the media and fans their updates on Adventure World, which is now going to be the new name of the old Walt Disney Studios, which was Disneyland Paris's second gate, one that I worked on and know intimately. In 2018, Bob Iger announced to the world that there was going to be a major investment into Disneyland Paris Resort. About $2 billion USD or euro, we can talk about it. But he sat down with the current president of France and announced the grand plans, which had been in work now for many years. And we're finally getting a taste of it as we look at the work that's now been revealed to guests with the opening of Adventure Way, at least part of it. And the part that's opened is a real big change. All too recently ago, what is now tile and trees and landscaping was, asphalt and a couple of trees and a bush or two. Assuming the mandate for the project team was make this place better, fix it, take everything that people criticized and flip it on its head. If that was the mandate, they've achieved it. What's interesting to me about Adventure Way is you have it in a park that when it opened was very, very small, consisting mostly of asphalt and just a few trees. Now they've turned that knob from not to 10, but to 11. Because Adventure Way, if you walk the entire length of it and then beyond the lake back to the World of Frozen, it's basically, imagine if you will, walking the length of Disneyland Anaheim from the train station all the way back to Mickey's Toontown. It's that clear a shot. Along the straight walkway that comprises Adventure Way, there are 4 gardens. There's one devoted to Up, Tangled, a gazebo, which is basically kind of a Peter Pan English catch-all, it seems, and then a third entrance into Toy Story Playland. Now, these are all great, and I think it gives that whole park entrance sequence a Tivoli feel, and that's not a bad thing. Although there is already a Tivoli that they have to compete with. We'll see how it works out. Now, I know from having worked in France, you put a stick in the ground and turn your back, come back, and it's a mature tree. So I have no doubt that all the greenery that they're planting is going to be fantastic. Having said that, putting an entrance to another land that's already existing, a teacup, and a swing ride, which was barred from DCA, Disney California Adventure, with the Silly Symphony swings. They're good. They're great because it's adding ride capacity in a park that needs it. Having said that, there's really nothing unique about anything they're building, not even the World of Frozen, which is based upon the design of the ride that was built and opened in Hong Kong Disneyland. Toy Story Playland is set in Andy's hidden backyard. So to have a third entrance into that land is a little, it's strange. Moving on to the teacup ride. Not a bad thing. It's a crowd pleaser. It works. And you can see here, the design took that classic teacup and made a boat out of it. Moving on down Adventure Way, there's a transformation with a new ride having been announced that'll be added at the intersection just before the lake and across from the restaurant. This is a classic wave swinger based upon Up. Looking up, we can see across the lake toward the world of Arendelle. This is very much like the one in Hong Kong, of course, without the junior coaster. We don't yet have a date on the opening of the Lion King Flume ride, but I would do the math and assume that if Disney Adventure World grand opens in 2026, just next year, and that's followed by the Upride, and there's no reason it shouldn't open by 28, since it's basically a catalog off the shelf swing ride. That probably means The Lion King is going to be opening in late 29, or I guess by no later than 30, because you want to open that ride the year before Universal Great Britain opens, because you don't want to walk into that media buzzsaw of the brand new park opening in the UK. Whenever the Lion King Flume Ride opens, it will give guests a reason to come to Adventure World. The ride itself looks like a classic Disney combination ride, thrill ride, and dark ride. It's a very big mountain, and it will be a dominant structure there in the park. Inside, we can see from this rendering, they're going to the old original animated version to tell their story, which is a smart move. When this is all done in this phase, Adventure World will be now complete. It's hard to remember that there once was no park. More than 35 years ago, this entire area was just farmland, beet fields, as I recall. But there was a master plan to build this resort to the east of Paris. And as part of that, there were not just one, but two gates in the master agreement. Since before Euro Disneyland opened, I spent a lot of time on airplanes and driving on the roads to getting to the site. But I always had to stop to get a jumbo and a fromage and a bottle of water or maybe a Coke Light. That was my go-to, because in Disneyland Paris, my fuel of choice was always going to be a sandwich and a cup of coffee or a Coke Light. It fueled my work in that resort through the opening of Disneyland Paris and Walt Disney Studios. If I was still hungry, I could head on over to the Euro Disneyland Preview Center, where there was a movie theater, exhibit displays, a boutique, and a restaurant. Ooh, lots of good food there. Lots of good coffee. Whenever I've been asked, what was it like to build Euro Disneyland? The answer has always been, my memory is mud. Lots and lots of mud. And in the winter, walking across the site, I'd be covered head to toe with just a little slit for the eyes. And I'd get good at identifying people just by their eyes. And so I'd walk up to someone and say, "Bonjour, Susie, how are you?" And they'd say, "Oh, Jim, how are you too?" And we'd go back to work. True story. This is the Pirates of the Caribbean, which got finished and opened as part of Euro Disneyland Resort. The minutes clicked down, and finally the day came when I stood there to enjoy what little I contributed to a massive park. When Euro Disneyland finally opened, I was far back in the crowd when Michael Eisner made the announcement. But I was back in the crowd because I wanted to get over to Videopolis, because that's where Tina Turner was going to be performing. Now, granted, this was the 1980s, and the person who was making the announcement there in the video broadcast was very, very 80s, but so was I. Here, look at this. The 80s were not kind. But it was the 90s, and now Euro Disneyland Resort was open. The park went on to be very successful, although you wouldn't know it from the headlines. But talking about writing and things in documents, when we turn our attention to the master agreement, there's a very interesting little bit of dialogue or text or whatever you want to call it buried deep inside, because the agreement with the government was to build one park at a certain date, but also a second park that was to be built by another date. This was going to be the Disney MGM Studios Europe, not a copy of the one in Florida. No. And there are reasons for that. It was going to be a little bit more dramatic, a little bit less about the movie making aspect of the industry and more about being in the movies. I'm not going to say ride the movies, but you get the idea. I was part of the second attempt to build a movie park, the Walt Disney Studios Paris. I found myself once again in the crowd for an opening of a Disney park when the day came for the Walt Disney Studios Paris to open. This event was a more low-key affair than the opening of Euro Disneyland. Tina Turner was not there. Because, well, frankly, it was a more low-key event because it was a more low-key park. Not to say that the project team didn't have a lot of fun and the park didn't have merits, but it was a very different park with a very different intent than the one which opened as Walt Disney Studios Paris. The studio park was an odd mix. It was an actual working studio where they did television production, like Zap Zone. They also had some homage to old Hollywood with movie sets, faux movie sets. They also had something unusual for any Disney park, which was the use of old glass bottles shattered into asphalt. There's a name for this, a technical name. But the effect was it was barely a step up from asphalt. There was also a real lack of attention to the outer edges of this park. An area that was supposed to be glamorous was anything but. And it was very raw and industrial, and I don't think people ever understood exactly what it was supposed to be, because you don't know what a Hollywood backlot or a studio looks like unless you've lived in Hollywood, and people didn't. The park had imposed limits, and I met them as best I could. Shortly after the Walt Disney Studios Paris opened, it was acknowledged by Burbank that the park needs some financial love. And so the contractors were assembled and the bulldozers were pushed out to cut up the land there for the addition of a number of rides, shows, and attractions, many of which I was privileged to provide creative leadership for. Toon Studios was one of the first, and in that, there was rock work assembled, which that park did not have. Also trees, landscaping, colored concrete, go figure, and the Crush Coaster, which became the centerpiece for that side of the park. Unfortunately, the coaster is a lot more popular than the ride capacity would accommodate. Not to say it wasn't a good ride, it is. And that was the problem, because when you build something really good, people ride it. Go figure. An irony is that since Euro Disneyland opened to guests, not much has been added to that park. The last ride that was added to that park was one I designed, which is bringing Buzz Lightyear to Discoveryland. A still controversial decision. But it's interesting to note that while Euro Disneyland, now Disneyland Paris, didn't have anything significant ride-wise added to that park for many decades, the Walt Disney Studios, since the day it opened, has had seemingly nothing but construction. It also opens up this idea or philosophy that you have to ask yourself, do you pay the cost to build a proper park that opens day one? Or do you pay the luxury tax of trying to backfill with the things you should have built later on? There's arguments both sides. Obviously, it costs less to not build everything at once. But as I said, you do pay the luxury tax. You may not have much money, and you may be wearing handcuffs as you're spending it, but you try to do your best if you're a professional. In the case of the Walt Disney Studios, I was able to take an off-the-shelf ride here from Zimperla and create a customized version. And that became very popular. It found its way in different forms in other Disney parks. The whole idea behind Toy Story Playland, frankly, was trying to do something very quick, but it wasn't based on Toy Story. I remember pitching, hey, you guys, if you did Toy Story, you could use the marketing from the next movie to promote it. Eyes lit up as in the wallets opened. Again, you try to take advantage of what it is that you have in front of you. You look for opportunities. And if you're smart and lucky, you'll be enjoying success. But at the same time, one of the things I would try to do is holding a ham and cheese sandwich in one hand and wrapping a scarf around my mouth and head with the other is to have fun. The park has changed and evolved, going from parking lot of asphalt to Avengers Campuses. The company funding the expansion has been supportive, and they've spent a considerable amount. The Avengers Campus was a transformation I was part of as my last project there at Disney, taking an area that had been an industrial backlot and making it something that was recognizable, tactile, and immersive. Taking a ride that was first developed for Anaheim and bringing it in a new and refreshing way to Monde de Vallée. Disney parks experience change, all kinds of change, and the studios is about to experience its largest yet. But it'd be one that Walt himself would be very familiar with when he started out to build his little theme park in Anaheim, California. This is the one I love. Roy Disney looking and going, hope this works. And the record shows that it did work. The Orange Grove gave way, and on opening day, Walt Disney proclaimed to the world the opening. He had the first of its kind theme park. Not a carny park, not a trolley park, not an amusement park. No, a theme park. And it was such a good idea that others took notice. Which brings me to my last point. Taking the quote, "if you build it," it wasn't referring to a grassy field where you play baseball. It referred to competition. Let's take an example in the case of Shanghai Disneyland. This was a large, expansive Disney-level theme park resort there in Shanghai, China. And it was very successful, and it made an impression on the guests who came and the competitors who watched. Looking at it, they could see a template that they could copy to make their own theme parks. You can judge the success of a theme park based upon several criteria, but one of them is, do people think it's such a good idea that they want to compete with you? And that's the case in the Disney parks. It's been the case since the very beginning of Walt's dream in Anaheim. But today we see it in other places, such as with Shanghai Disneyland, which is about to get a competitor with the opening of Legoland in Shanghai, just a few short metro stops away from the park. Legoland is a good example of a legitimate competitor. Merlin, which has the rights to build Legoland, has a history. They know how to build this. They know what the intellectual property is. They have a template that's successful, and they have the capital to invest in a proper way. When Shanghai Disneyland gets its competitor in the form of Lego, it's going to have to up its game, lest it falls behind. Turning our attention back to Europe, we see the announcement that Universal Studios Great Britain will open in 2031. Now, that wasn't on the horizon when Disneyland in Paris decided to invest in the creation and rebranding of the Studios Park as Adventure World, which will open just next year. That wasn't in Disney's plan, but it's now on the horizon. And so Disney will be countering that in a variety of ways, some of which we know and some which they don't even know. However, we do know that there'll be an Upride, which is an off-the-shelf catalog swing ride based on the one that's in DCA, and also following that, the Lion King Flume Ride. These will be two good attractions that'll flesh out that second gate. As far as the future, we really don't know. They still are committed in Paris to building a third gate, but we have no idea when that'll be. All we know is what's in front of us. And what's ahead of us is that Disneyland Paris is going to be facing a real competitor when Universal opens their park in 2031. Challenges come in all forms. I recall when I could take a direct train from London to Disneyland Paris. Apart from its history and apart from its challenges, the Disney Studios is becoming Adventure World. It is being transformed in ways that probably no one would have realized or thought about or imagined. It's all going to be to the good. Or we could just rub a little more magic on it. And that'll do it for this episode of Disney Journey. This is a continuing story about Europe with Universal and Disney now in competition, and I'll be covering that on episodes to come. I've also left some links in the show notes about previous episodes that dealt with this topic. Meanwhile, continue to like and subscribe and send me your comments because I do read every one and I answer many of them. Until the next time, it's goodbye from Lost Canyon.